I often think that the most valuable thing in a man's life isn't his victories or his achievements or the money in his account. Those things come and go. What really matters are the people who walk beside you. And most of all, that one person who stays when everything else falls away, like dry leaves in autumn. But to understand this truth, I had to walk a long road. Now, as a husband and a father, I can look back and honestly tell my story. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone. We had a park with a pond, an old school with chipped paint on the windowsills, and a courtyard where the boys played soccer until the street lights blinked on. I didn't think much about serious things back then. We lived in dreams. Some boys wanted to be footballers, others astronauts. And me, more than anything, I wanted a girl from the class next door to notice me. Her name was Lena. She always wore her hair in a braid tied with a bright ribbon. My friends teased me, nudged me, "Go on, say something to her." But all I could manage was a clumsy hi. My heart beat so loudly I was sure the entire hallway could hear it. Still, she became my very first crush. I remember one school dance vividly. Nothing glamorous, just a few tables with pastries, a tape recorder with cassettes, and paper garlands strung across the hall. I asked Lena to dance. It was a slow song, and as we moved across the floor, I felt as if my feet no longer touched the ground. That feeling of floating, of being lifted by pure joy. I searched for it many times later in life, but it was in that stuffy hall, under dim lights, that I first realized what it meant to truly like someone. Our relationship didn't last long. We shared a desk, exchanged sandwiches, laughed together, and then one day she told me, "You're nice, but I love someone else." For a 14-year-old boy, it felt like the end of the world. I remember walking home that day in silence, the streets blurry through tears I tried to hide. It hurt in a way only first heartbreak can. But now, years later, I'm grateful for that early wound. It taught me how to accept rejection, how not to hold grudges, and how to move on with dignity. By the time I reached high school, I was different. Taller, stronger, more confident, thanks to sports and long evenings at the gym. And suddenly, girls started noticing me. But back then, I still confused attraction with real connection. There was a classmate named Katya. Bright, always laughing, always the center of attention. I thought that if I stood beside her, some of her light might shine on me. We began dating. Our first dates were innocent, walks through town, scribbled notes passed in class. I was happy, or at least I thought I was. But within a couple of months, I realized we had nothing in common. She lived for noise and attention, while I preferred silence and books. Our breakup was dramatic. We quarreled in the schoolyard, right in front of friends. I raised my voice, she cried, and everyone watched. At the time, I felt victorious. But as soon as the crowd dispersed, all I felt was emptiness. Later, I would understand it's easy to hurt, but far harder to part ways respectfully. University was the next chapter, a bigger city, a wider world, and with it came freedom and new girls. Every new acquaintance felt like fate. I was convinced again and again, this must be the one. But time after time, the relationships fizzled. There was Anna, a journalism student, clever, witty, always ready for a debate. With her, life felt like a whirlwind of exhibitions, late-night talks, and endless arguments. She was fascinating, but her dreams were of distant cities and constant travel. I, on the other hand, longed for stability, for a home, for family. Our paths diverged. I still remember that railway station goodbye, her train pulling away, me realizing I couldn't chase someone who never wanted to stay. Then there was Marina, soft-spoken, gentle, always ready to help. For a while, I believed she was the right one. But soon I noticed something troubling. She lost herself in me. She mirrored my interests, my choices, even my words. I didn't want someone who dissolved into my shadow. I wanted an equal,
someone strong enough to stand beside me. Each story left a trace, some like faint scars, others like deep cuts. But slowly I learned. I learned to distinguish infatuation from true feeling. I learned that respect was more important than passion. I learned that love isn't about remaking someone, but about accepting them, whole, imperfect, and real. And then one day, when I was almost resigned to the thought that true love might be a myth, I met her, the woman who would become my wife. But before that moment arrived, I had to live through every lesson, every mistake, every fleeting romance. This first chapter is only the beginning. It carries my teenage mistakes, my first crushes, the innocence I'll never get back. But it was the foundation. It was the road that led me to her, the woman who now sits across from me at breakfast, smiling as she pours me coffee.
When I moved to the city for university, it was like someone had taken the walls off my world. In my small hometown, everyone knew me as the boy who played football in the courtyard, the boy who once dated Katja, the boy who had a crush on Lena. My story was already written there. But at university, no one knew me. I could be anyone. I still remember the first night in the dormitory. I carried my suitcase up 3 flights of stairs, my palms sweating, my heart racing with that strange mix of fear and excitement. When I opened the door, the room was half occupied. A tall guy was already unpacking, blasting music from a cheap speaker. He looked up, grinned, and said, "Welcome, neighbor." That was it, the start of a new life. The dormitory never slept. At midnight, the corridors would be filled with guitar songs, arguments about politics, people running around in slippers to borrow sugar or boiling water. It was chaotic, noisy, and at first exhausting. But soon I realized something. That chaos was freedom. Nobody cared who you had been before. Here, you wrote your own script. Meeting Anna. It was in the library, of all places, that I first met Anna. I was searching for a textbook, some thick, dusty volume I didn't really want to read. And when I finally found it, she was already holding it in her hands. "You need this too?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Her voice was quick, confident. "Yeah," I mumbled. She smiled, that quick, teasing smile. "Take it. I already copied the pages I need." That was our first exchange, but it wasn't a last. I started noticing her everywhere. In the cafeteria, surrounded by people. In lectures, always the one raising her hand. In the courtyard, sitting cross-legged on the grass with a notebook in her lap. She had an energy about her that drew people in. Anna studied journalism, and she carried herself as if she already were a reporter chasing a big story. Talking to her was like being caught in a current. She pulled you along, made you see the world differently. She quoted books I had never heard of, films I had never watched. With her, even drinking tea from chipped dorm mugs at midnight felt like an adventure. We grew close quickly. At first, it was friendship, or at least that's what I told myself. But I found myself waiting for her texts, replaying our conversations in my head, walking across campus just to accidentally bump into her. One evening after a student theater performance, we walked together under the yellow street lights. I stopped mid-step, looked at her, and before I could lose my courage, I blurted out, "Anna, I like you." She laughed, not cruelly, but softly, as if she had expected this all along. She said, "I know," and slipped her hand into mine. The whirlwind. Being with Anna was like living inside a whirlwind. We went to art exhibits, protests, poetry readings. She dragged me into every new experience, and I followed. Sometimes excited, sometimes exhausted, but always fascinated. We fought, too, of course. She loved debates, and I wasn't always quick enough to keep up. She'd argue passionately about politics or feminism, and I'd get defensive, not because I disagreed, but because I wasn't used to someone challenging me so directly. Yet those fights always ended in laughter, or in long, quiet walks where we both calmed down. But as time went on, I began to notice something. Anna's dreams were always elsewhere. She spoke of internships in other cities, of working for international magazines, of never settling down. My dreams were simpler. A home, a family, a life built slowly, steadily. I wanted roots. She wanted wings. I tried to ignore it at first, convincing myself that love could bridge any distance. But the truth caught up with us one autumn morning at the train station. She had been offered a 3-month internship in another city. I carried her suitcase to the platform, my chest tight. She said, "You could come visit," though her eyes were already far away. I nodded, but inside I knew the truth. She wasn't coming back, not really. As the train pulled out of the station, I felt something break inside me. It wasn't anger, not even sadness. More like an ache of inevitability. Some people are meant to pass through your life like storms. They change the landscape, but they don't stay. Marina. After Anna, I didn't want to fall again. But life has its own rhythm. A year later, I met Marina. She was the opposite of Anna in every way. Where Anna was fire, Marina was water. Gentle, calm, always ready to listen. She studied medicine and carried herself with quiet determination. We met in the cafeteria line when I forgot my wallet and she paid for my meal with a smile. "Consider it a loan," she said, though she never let me pay her back. Our relationship was steady, almost soothing. We spent evenings cooking simple meals in the dorm kitchen, studying side by side, walking hand in hand through the city streets. She cared deeply, sometimes too deeply. If I had a problem, she'd drop everything to help. If I mentioned a hobby, she threw herself into it as if it were her own. At first I was touched by her devotion, but slowly unease grew. I began to mirror me so much that I felt like I was losing her, the real her, beneath the reflection. If I liked a band, she liked it too. If I said I hated a film, suddenly so did she. One evening I asked her what music she listened to before we met. She hesitated, then laughed, saying, "I don't even remember." That moment chilled me. Love, I realized, wasn't about two people becoming one. It was about two whole people walking side by side, equal, whole, and free. With Marina, I felt like I was carrying both of us, and she was vanishing, piece by piece. The breakup was quiet. No tears, no shouting, just a long walk where I told her I couldn't keep going, that I wanted her to be herself, not an echo of me. She nodded, eyes downcast, and whispered, "I don't know who I am without you." Those words haunted me for years. Lessons learned. By the time I finished university, I had loved and lost more than once. Each relationship left a different mark. The fire of Anna, the gentleness of Marina, the laughter of my high school romances, the sting of rejection from Lena. I carried all of it with me. But here's what I learned. Infatuation is not love. Infatuation burns bright, but fades quickly. Respect matters more than passion. Without it, even the hottest flame dies. Love is not about changing someone or letting them disappear into you. It's about standing side by side, whole and free. At the time, I didn't yet know that I was slowly being prepared for something greater. I didn't know that all these lessons were shaping me, teaching me how to recognize true love when it finally came. But deep down, a seed had been planted. The belief that somewhere, someday, I would find not just a girlfriend, not just a fling, but a partner. A woman who would challenge me, support me, and walk with me through every season of life. I hadn't met her yet,
But she was out there, and soon fate would bring her into my world.
By the time I graduated, I carried with me not just a diploma, but a collection of memories that felt heavier than any textbook I had ever studied. Every relationship, every late-night conversation, every breakup, they had all left their marks. Some were scars, some were faint scratches, but together they formed a map of where I had been. For a while, I thought that maybe love just wasn't for me. Or maybe I wasn't made for love. It seemed that every time I opened my heart, something went wrong. With Anna, it was the distance. Her dreams soared higher and farther than I could follow. With Marina, it was the disappearance of self. She loved me so much she forgot to love herself. With Katya, it was the lack of understanding. And with Lena, well, it was simply that life at 14 is not built for forever. Restlessness after graduation. After finishing university, I moved into a small rented apartment and got my first real job. It wasn't glamorous, an entry-level position in an office where my main responsibility was to file reports and make coffee for my boss. But for me, it was a symbol of independence. The days were long, the pay was small, but the city outside my window was alive. Neon lights flickered, trams screeched along their rails, and cafes buzzed with people who seemed to know exactly what they wanted from life. I envied them. I went on dates, of course. Friends introduced me to friends of friends. Sometimes I sat across from women in cozy cafes, sipping bitter coffee, trying to ignite a spark. But more often than not, it ended the same way. Polite goodbyes, numbers exchanged but never called, promises to meet again that both sides knew were empty. It wasn't that the women weren't interesting. Many were kind, clever, and beautiful, but something was always missing. A connection, a depth, a sense that this could be more than just another passing chapter. Nights of reflection. There were nights when I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying my past relationships like a film reel. What had I done wrong? Was I too demanding? Too distant? Too cautious? I remember Anna's laughter echoing in crowded streets, her eyes always fixed on horizons beyond me. I remembered Marina's soft voice saying, "I don't know who I am without you." I remembered the sting of Katya's tears, the innocence of Lena's ribbon-tied braid. Each memory carried a lesson, though at the time it only felt like weight. One evening after a long day at work, I sat with a notebook and wrote down everything I thought love should be. Not what it had been in the past, but what I wanted it to be in the future. I wrote, "Love must be freedom, not chains. It must be respect, not control. It must be two people walking side by side, not one dragging the other. It must have laughter, but also silence. It must be steady enough to endure storms, yet light enough to dance in the rain." As I read those words back to myself, I felt something shift. For the first time, I realized that love wasn't about chasing fireworks or clinging to someone out of fear. It was about partnership, about building, not just burning. The influence of friends. During those years, I watched my friends fall in love, marry, and even start families. Some of them glowed with happiness. Others, I could tell, had rushed into relationships out of loneliness or fear of being alone. I remember one conversation with my friend Dimitri. He had married his college sweetheart, and they already had a baby daughter. One evening, as we sat on his balcony drinking tea, I asked him, "How do you know she's the one?" He smiled, looking through the glass door where his wife was playing with her child. "Because with her, I can be myself, completely. No masks, no pretending, and she doesn't just accept me, she makes me better. That's how I know." His words stayed with me. I had never felt that kind of peace in my past relationships. With Anna, I always felt like I was running to catch up.
With Marina, I felt like I had to carry the weight of both of us. With others, I wore masks, trying to be funnier, cooler, smarter than I really was. But what Dmitri described, that sounded like the kind of love worth waiting for. The quiet turning point. The turning point didn't come in a sudden revelation. It wasn't like lightning striking. Instead, it came quietly in the form of acceptance. I stopped chasing love like a prize to be won. I stopped measuring my worth by whether or not I was in a relationship. I began to focus on myself. I read more, exercised more, worked harder at my job. I built friendships that nourished me. I spent time with my family, appreciating the small things I had once overlooked. And slowly, without realizing it, I became ready. Ready not just to fall in love, but to give love. To give without losing myself, to share without suffocating, to walk beside someone without dragging or being dragged. A glimpse of the future. I didn't know it then, but this was the season that prepared me for her, the woman who would one day become my wife. If I had met her earlier, I might not have recognized her. I might have been too immature, too restless, too selfish. But because of everything, the heartbreaks, the lessons, the long nights of doubt, I was finally in a place where I could see her for who she truly was. Not as an escape from loneliness, not as a dream to chase, but as a partner, equal and real. That realization, that love must be built, not stumbled into, was the true turning point of my life.
Sometimes in life, the most important moments arrive quietly. No fireworks, no dramatic music, no sudden realization that the world has just shifted. They sneak in like sunlight through a window you forgot to close, warming the room before you even notice. That's how it was when I met her, the woman who would one day become my wife. An ordinary evening. It was a Friday evening, and I hadn't planned to go anywhere. Work had been long, the kind of day that leaves your body heavy and your thoughts scattered. But a friend insisted I join a small gathering. Nothing fancy, just a few people at a cafe. I hesitated, but something inside me said, go. When I arrived, the cafe was buzzing with voices and the smell of fresh coffee. Our friend waved me over to a table already crowded with people, and there she was. At first, she didn't stand out in the noisy room. She wasn't the loudest, nor the one drawing everyone's attention. But there was something about her. A calm presence, a quiet confidence. She looked up, smiled politely, and that was it. I didn't know yet that my life had just changed. The first conversation. We were introduced casually. This is Elena, my friend said. She works at the design studio downtown. She extended her hand, and I noticed how firm her hand shape was. Steady, self-assured. We exchanged a few polite words, and then the conversation at the table pulled us in different directions. For a while, I simply listened to her talk to others. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't performing. She was simply herself. Thoughtful, funny when she wanted to be, serious when the topic turned deep. Later that night, when people started leaving, we found ourselves side by side at the counter, both waiting for the barista to refill our cups. She glanced at me and said, "You're quiet. Do you not like crowds?" I laughed softly. I like people, but I like conversations more than noise. She tilted her head, studying me for a moment, then smiled. Me too. It was a small exchange, but it felt different. There was no pressure, no mask, no need to pretend. Just honesty. The first walk. When the gathering ended, we walked out together. The night air was cool and the street lights shimmered under the street lamps. I offered to walk her home. She hesitated, then nodded. That walk remains etched in my memory. Not because of what we said. The conversation was simple about books we liked, the movies we didn't, the funny quirks of our jobs. What made it unforgettable was how natural it felt. There were no awkward silences, no forced attempts to impress, just two people walking side by side, discovering the rhythm of each other's company. At her building, she turned to me and said, "Thank you for the walk. And thank you for the conversation." She smiled, and for a moment I wanted to say something more, to ask if I could see her again. But I stopped myself. Instead, I simply said goodnight and walked away, my heart strangely light. The slow beginning. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about her, not with the obsessive rush of infatuation I had known before, but with a quiet curiosity. Who was she really? What made her smile? What made her frown? What dreams did she carry? I reached out, cautiously, a message here, a question there, and she responded, not with excessive enthusiasm, but with steady warmth. Our conversations grew longer, stretching into evenings. We met again, this time for coffee, then for a walk in the park, then for a visit to a bookstore where she laughed at how I spent 20 minutes debating whether to buy a single novel. Each meeting deepened my sense that something rare was unfolding. What set her apart? What struck me most about her was balance. She was strong without being harsh, gentle without being weak. She had opinions and she voiced them, but she also listened. She asked questions not just to fill silence, but because she genuinely cared about the answers. I remember one moment vividly. We were sitting on a bench, watching children play nearby. She turned to me and asked, "What do you want from life?" It wasn't a casual question. She asked it with the kind of seriousness that told me she really wanted to know. I thought for a long time before answering. "I want a family, a home, someone to build life with, not just adventures or distractions, but something real." She looked at me, her eyes steady, and nodded. Me too. It was such a simple exchange, but it felt like two puzzle pieces clicking into place. No rush, no pressure. With her, there was no rush. We didn't declare love after a week, didn't make grand gestures to prove our feelings. Instead, we let things unfold, step by step, conversation by conversation, walk by walk. And yet, beneath that calm pace, there was a certainty growing inside me. I didn't need fireworks to tell me this was real. I didn't need to chase her or cling to her. With her, I felt at peace. I could be myself, truly, completely, without masks. And she didn't just accept me. She brought out the best in me. Looking back, when I think of that first meeting now, it amazes me how ordinary it seemed. Just a cafe, just a group of friends, just another Friday night. And yet hidden within that ordinary evening was the beginning of everything extraordinary in my life. I had spent years searching, stumbling, learning through mistakes and heartbreaks. And then, when I least expected it, she appeared. Not as a storm, not as a distraction, but as a steady light. And though I didn't fully realize it that night, I had found her. The woman who would become my wife.